Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Mark, and welcome to the Pixelnauts Twitch channel. Today we're going to be doing some programming. This is my weekly programming stream, so yeah, hope you guys are ready for some code. So this week's stream, I'm basically going to be bug fixing the majority of the time. Because we're basically in the home stretch right now for our open beta, so, you know, while I'd still like to work on the mission system, I can't really do that this week because, you know, that'll be for after the beta comes out, but we have some lingering bugs and stuff that need solving, so we're going to work on that today, and I'll walk you guys through, like, just how I go about bug fixing, and I'll try to, you know, walk you through the different systems that I am bug fixing and how they work and stuff like that as I go, just so you understand what I'm doing. But yeah, other than that, should be fun times. Hey Nita, how's it going? Thank you guys for joining me. So yeah, let's jump into it and we can talk about what we're going to be tackling today. Woo, woo. Hey, Ivy, how's it going? Nice to see ya. There was a cane in the rain. There was a cane in the rain without an umbrella, half wet, half dry. Most folks walked by. A kid not thick with shoes twice its size and googly eyes found on an umbrella. What? Whoa. Thanks, Scarce. I'm just gonna read through Scarce's stuff that he posted here. Also, hey Mystic, how's it going? Both sunny and rainy, they should go together. Search the numbers 86398026. DNA, combine your cane and umbrella. Also, hey Skeet, how's it going? It appears to be little yet very heavy on one, call it Z blah blah blah, yet another color can break light without releasing it. The name should provide another clue for you. Dark sense with the last 4 heavy digits in hex. You release some magic. When you crack the letters, go binary, Zor, and when you find what you're looking for, carefully observe it as it will reveal the final for the few lucky. Interesting. Also, hey, Sleepy Green Knight with the lurk command, and Anne. Sweet, thank you guys for joining me. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we can make this a little bit entertaining, but this is mostly going to be a bug fixing stream here, but that's okay. We're going to pull out our handy dandy notepad that we always like to use here, and I'm going to talk through what we're going to be working on today. So, like I said, we're getting close to the open beta, so we need to be bug fixing. And there's a couple things that I'm going to be working on today. So the first thing that I'm going to look into is item firing effects don't play properly over the network. So we can look at some of the network code and how that works. Fire the effects through an RPC function. So I can explain to you guys kind of how the network works and how you're supposed to communicate back and forth. Because basically you kind of have to think of it like if you're firing an effect on someone's local machine, then you also have to fire that same effect on everybody else's machine for their character. And so you have to pass some data over the network in order to be able to properly do that. You have to pass like what player you want to play the effect on, what effect you want to play, where you want the effect to play, what rotation you want the effect to have, and on all that fun stuff. But it's kind of interesting because you have to break down your data into simple forms, send it over the network, then receive it, and do the thing that you're trying to do. So we'll go over that and how that works, which should be kind of interesting. And the big one that we're going to be working on today is the customization strings. So there's a few things going on. You guys have probably seen the trailer and stuff for the game. So hey, Pixelnuts, how's it going? Or Alex, rather. I guess I'm also Pixelnuts today. Pikachu Doritos. Oh my goodness. Hey, Pink Heart, how's it going? Thank you guys for all stopping by. I really appreciate it. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen the new trailer, we can actually watch it. Let's watch it together here. We'll do a group viewing. Okay, let me just pull it up. Where did it go? Where did it go? Here it is. We'll do a group viewing of the new trailer. So here we go. As you can see, the game has come an awfully long way since the open beta, if any of you guys played the open beta. A reaction vid, Pink Heart. This is my impression of somebody reacting on YouTube. That was cool. Those look cool. Looks pretty good. Whoa, look at that guy. Looks pretty good. I give it a 5 out of 10 because it looks pretty good. Actually, I give it a 10 out of 10. Anyway, nailed it. Thanks, guys. Hey, Ian, how's it going? So, yeah, anyway. That's a new trailer, so you guys can see that the customizations are a big part of the game, obviously, and there are some bugs with the customization system still left over from when we did the open beta. So, basically what's happening with the customization system right now is that when it's the same kind of thing that we're talking about with the FX when we're passing the strings over the network. So basically you equip all your customization items and then it breaks those down. Each of those items has a code for what that item is, and it breaks those all down into a big long string for each player, and then it sends those strings over the network so that on everybody else's computer, your players or their players on your computer can get customized. And we have a function that intakes the string and stuff like that. And yeah, I designed the system quite a while ago now because it was before the closed beta, but there are some bugs with it. Basically, we're getting either the wrong strings or some things are getting overwritten here and there. So there's a few things that I want to do to try to mitigate that. The first of which is I'm going to be going through and making sure the customization strings are never edited or are never touched after, or outside of the customization menu. So basically, the intake function for the customization stuff, and we'll go all over all this stuff in detail when we get down to it, but the intake system for the customization stuff takes in your string and it fills up your character with all the things that you need, and it also saves out like the strings and stuff. So ideally, in a perfect world, if we didn't get the wrong strings, that shouldn't be a problem. But in order to mitigate some of the problems that we're having, I'm going to be going in and making sure that our customization strings never actually get edited outside of the menu where you actually customize your character. And that should eliminate some of the issues, I hope. And I'm also going to be going through the net code to ensure that the correct strings are being sent. And I'll also be going through each instance where a character model is customized and bug fixing, basically. So I'm going to go through each instance of where we have characters actually being customized, and I'm just going to make sure that it's not feeding in the wrong data or anything like that. So yeah, those are the major things for today. There are a few other little things here, but I figure we can focus on this stuff today because I really need to get these customization strings fixed as fast as possible because whoops, I don't actually want to save this. But as you can imagine, the customization system is like a huge part of the game, so getting this stuff fixed is top priority. So I'm going to move my little notepad over here so I can take a look at it if I need to. Cool. So yeah, let's get into it. Oops, I don't actually want to say this. What secrets? There's no secrets in this game. Watch, guys. We can watch my stream on my stream. Isn't it amazing? All right. So let's get into it. No secrets yet. A little too meta. All right. So the first thing that we're going to work on is the effects thing I was talking about, because that's a little more simple. And we actually worked on this effects system together on stream. So we need to go into our base race scene here. This is where a bunch of stuff is stored. Like I've talked about before, our game has all of our objects and stuff stored in separate scenes, and they load in. So you guys can see this scene. Here, I'll turn the lighting off so you can see better. This scene has our start gate right here. This is like our start gate object. It's got a bunch of different scripts on it to control how the start gate works. And over here, in this scene, is our end gate. You can see it's the finish line here. And they're super emissive with the lighting on. And you can see the cool like screen effect that Alex put on the game here. That's got like a little, makes it look like the light is kind of bouncing off some smudges on your screen here. So anyway, it's kind of cool how the game loads, because the game loads this scene, loads the start and end gate, and then on top of this it loads a track whenever you pick a track, and it moves the start and end gate to where they need to be. And then when it's done with the track, it just unloads it. So this scene is always here, and this scene houses the players and stuff. So until you reset the game, we never have to respawn the character models. We never have to respawn any of the race logic. It's all there all the time. But anyway, inside of the race controller, I have this FX controller here that has our FX pool and all that stuff on it here. So we need to what we're working on right now is the FX for when you shoot an item, and we have to make sure that those are going to play correctly over the network. So we have this script here called Item Effects Controller, and you can see it's a singleton here, so we're just going to pop that open because this is where we're going to have to do our code, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly. Right, okay, so the Item Effects Controller is a singleton that holds a dictionary of item fire effects with an enum as the key and an FX trigger as the value. A dictionary is a way of holding data where you can have a key and a value. And then when you want to look it up, you can say, oh, I want to find the item fire effect that's at key, you know, whatever. Like, we probably do that down. Oh, no, this is just for adding to it. So you can see that when we initialize this, basically it checks if the data exists in the game with it, which is database.instance, which is why I'm doing this in update. If you guys are programmers, you probably wonder why I wouldn't do this in start. But the idea behind this is that we have different scenes loading in. So there's a possibility that this databanks object won't exist. So I just do it in update. We have a bool to check if it's initialized or not. When it finishes doing what it needs to do to initialize itself, then it turns off. So it just runs every frame until it finds databank.instance, basically. And what it's doing is it's saying for each item effects data in the databank data, and we're going to add it. If our dictionary doesn't already contain the key, then we're going to add the key and the value here. Key value pairs, you may have heard before. That's what it's all about. So this is not the script that we're looking for. So I'm going to look at references to the item fire effects dictionary. And we're going to take a peek here. So where are we firing this stuff off? So these are the references that are inside the script that we're looking at right now. These are the references that we need, though. We see we have one on the bomb script, we have one on the enlarger script, we have one on the bouncing projectile script, one on the homing projectile script, and one on the shockwave. So these are all the places that we want to trigger effects. So we're going to need to make sure that all of these are converted over to work over photon. These aren't cigarettes you're looking for. This isn't the script you're looking for. So we can pop into our first reference here. This is in the bomb script. And we'll make our little references window a little smaller here so we can see what's going on. So here's our call to the effect. So we're telling the FX pool that we want to trigger this particular effect. And we want to trigger it at the player's position, the player's rotation, and we want to parent it to the player. So there's a lot of issues with this call that are going to mess up things in Photon. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a new function that's going to do this for us. And this is the basis of how you can do things over Photon. So we need to send all this data to everybody else's computers. So we're going to create a new function, and it's going to be called void trigger FX, because there shouldn't be one called that in this script. I couldn't imagine. Yeah, there isn't. And then we're going to grab this just for simplicity's sake. We're going to paste it down here for now, and we're going to call our function here. Whoops! I don't want to trigger audio. I want to trigger the effect. And now you can see that, basically I've just replaced it. So now it's going to run this function. It's going to do the exact same thing that it was already doing, but it needs this data. It doesn't have the player transform data and stuff. So we know that we're going to need that. So we're going to pass that in. And I believe that the player is going to be the player controller. So we're going to pass in a player controller and just call it player. And there we go. Now our errors have gone away because we've passed in the correct thing here. So now we've got that. And the next thing that we're going to need to pass in is this, I believe. We may actually not need to pass it in, but it could be. We'll see if we need it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a secondary part to this function, and it's going to be an RPC function. So we're going to say we're going to name it void RPC underscore trigger effects, and this is going to be our this is going to be where we actually do things. So we're going to grab that again, and we're going to put this down into our RPC function. Oh, and we do need a keyword here. So we're going to write pun RPC. And what this keyword does, it says right here, replacement for the RPC attribute with a different name, used to flag methods as remote callable. So basically we have a photon controller in the game, and what it does is it'll run through the whole game. It'll look for any functions that have this pun RPC, and it'll add them to their list, to its list of functions that can be called remotely from other people's computers. Oh, you know what, Skeet? I totally forgot to do Bob Ross last night. You're right. Totally forgot about that shit. It's okay. I could do it now. I could do the joy of programming. So welcome everybody to the joy of programming. And as you can see, we're just working on our little photon function for triggering effects here. So now you can see that we have a little error up here on the trigger FX, and that's because we need to pass in the player controller. So we're just going to pass in player, because we already have a reference to the player controller coming into the function that we're calling this in. So that's just going to work out just fine right there. And so now what we need to do is we need to make sure that if we're in an online game, we're going to trigger the effect over RPC. And if we're not in an online game, we're just going to trigger the effect normally, and then we're going to have to edit our RPC function down here to get it to work properly. Simple as that. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. We're just going to take our fan brush here. Yeah, they redeemed... Everybody on my stream last night, Skeeter redeemed a Bob Ross mode, and I just totally forgot to do it. I just beat the devil out of it, didn't I? So we're going to need to make sure that this function triggers correctly for online or local games. And we're going to have to change the way that we're thinking about this a little bit. So, let's just see here. So, here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to write a nice little function here to check if we're in online or local. Do you like beef jerky? So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to check if the game's online. So we're going to say if photon connection controller, and we're going to dot status. So we're checking the status of the photon connection controller, and we're going to say if it's equal to photon connection controller dot online status. Now this is all stuff that Ben wrote so that we could check this stuff very easily. Dot local game. So we're just checking if the status of the photon connection controller is telling us that we're in a local game or not. It's just a long-winded way of checking that. And then that's if we're in a local game, we're just going to trigger our effect relatively normally. And if we're not, we're going to have an else if here, and this is going to be for our online game here. So we're going to say photon network dot is connected and ready. So we're checking if the photon network is connected and ready, and use the double and sign to say in your if statement, if you're trying to say if this thing is true and that thing is true, you need to use the double and. Just like up here where I'm saying if this thing is equal to this thing, you need to use a double equal sign. That's just part of the syntax of C#. I don't know exactly why they made it like that, but that's just the way it is, I guess. I don't really know. Bob Ross always makes you smile. So, if photon network dot is connection or is connected and ready, and photon network dot, where is it now? I think it's called in room or something. Yeah, here we go. And in room. So this is making sure that the players are actually in a game room before we bother triggering this stuff, but we won't be triggering these effects until we're in the game anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. But you always want to put You always want to overdo it. You always want to overdo your checks, because if you don't, then you're going to end up with errors later because something happened in an order you weren't expecting. And that's one of the biggest things with networking, actually, is that sometimes things just happen in an order that you're not expecting. So you really got to overdo the checks and balances, basically. Oh my God, jackfruit jerky. What exactly is that, Alex? I'm kind of curious. I've never heard of that. And the last thing that we're going to check here is called Get Photon View. Oh, it doesn't like that. Oh, I may need to use an include here. Yes, that's right. So I need a using tag because it's not finding what I'm trying to do here. So we come up to the top of our script here. Oh, actually, it's already in here. Huh. What is missing from here? I guess the UI is, but that shouldn't be important. Maybe I just have to write it out and see if it errors. So we're going to say get photon view. Yeah, it doesn't want to work. Why is that not working? Hold on. Let me take a look at some other code here just to see. Why does it not like get photon view right now? Yeah, this is what I need. Oh, because I put get photo view, that's why. The name get photon view does not exist in the current context. Huh. So what does that stem from then? Photon view player health system dot get photon view. So what do I need in order to get photon view to work? I've got using photon.pun, which is the one that I think is what I need. Moobot. Oh my goodness. Moobot's link into the game. Jackfruit is this crazy fruit they use as a meat substitute. Makes great pulled pork. Oh shit. Oh yeah, I forgot, because you're vegan, right, Alex? It's pretty easy these days. Lots of vegan junk food. Okay, so why is this get photon view not working then? I need to set up... I need to set up bomb.cs to be able to use photon. Oh, I see, because bomb actually... Okay, so we may have to... It doesn't derive from mono behavior, so we actually may need to do these functions in a different place. But they're basically going to still be the same thing. So, instead of doing them in the item stuff, what we're going to do is we're going to do them on the player somewhere. So, we will get rid of this, and we will leave this as is for now, even though it's going to have an... We could actually do it in the item effects controller, I think. Let's see. Let's see if it'll work in the item effects controller here. Right. So this is where we're going to need using photon.pun. Okay, so it should work in here. No, it doesn't want to work in here either. I guess because it's a singleton. Okay, I guess we can just do it right on the player then. Maybe in the player's health system, and we'll just have it be a callable function. So let me think about this for a second. Yeah, actually, we should be able to do it in the health system, no problem. Because this bomb already has a reference to the player, so we should just be able to write player.healthsystem.trigger the effect. Yeah. I think that should work okay. So, let's get into our player health system here, and we'll just create a new public function. And we'll say public void trigger fx. Let's call it the same thing. And now we can see that that hasn't been used. Oh, actually, I guess we're just going to paste it in here, right? But we just need to make this a public function. So it's going to be public void trigger effects, and then we have our RPC function down here. So what we can do now is we can go into bomb, and we should just be able to say player dot trigger effects. Oh, wait, not just player dot health system dot trigger effects. And we don't really need to pass in the player because we already are going to know what the player is over here. So we can get rid of this. And we can get rid of this for now, too, I think. Because we already know who the player is. Because we have a reference to the player controller called controller here. So we're just going to replace these things that say player with controller. And look, our get photon view is mine is working. I guess that's true. We have to do it on the player anyway, because we need to be able to check if the photon view belongs to the player that we're doing this on. Whoops. I'm missing a bracket here somewhere. Ah, missing the bracket right here. There we go. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, so we can't do vegan anything. It tastes like crap. I actually like some of the fake meat stuff. I don't mind it. I find that anything is like that once you start, though. Like, I do keto a lot to lose weight, and you can't eat sugar or sugary things or you know, bread and stuff for that matter, because anything with carbs. But we have, like, sugar replacements, and they taste just as good as sugar to me because I don't eat sugar. So, like, if you're eating meat every day and then you try to eat fake meat, it's not going to taste as good. But if you stop eating meat and just eat fake meat, it will taste just as good as meat to you. I think, anyway. That's my theory. Because that's definitely what it's like. Like, Diet Pop, to me, tastes... Like, we get Coke Zero, and that tastes like regular Coke to me. And if I were to drink a regular Coke, it tastes, like, so overly syrupy that I can't even handle it. Oh, Ben fixed the ramps. We just got some messages here on Discord. I'll have to read through them later. I'm going to miss out on everything. Anyway, so we got our new function here. Everything's good. Now we can use photon is mine. So now let's get back on our train of thought here. So else if photon view is mine. So now what we need to do is we need to call this RPC function over the network, and then we will edit our RPC function after the fact here. So we got to get a little piece of code here so that I can see. We'll just pull our bomb script over to this side here, and we're going to pull over our FX pool script. Okay. So where were we here? There we go. Here we are. So now we need to call it over the network. And the way we do that is pretty simple. Change is always strange at first. Yeah, it definitely is. But the way we call this photon function over the network. So now we're saying if the connection is ready, if the photon network is in a room, and if get photon view is mine, controlled by the player that this is calling the function on. So now we're going to say get photon view dot try RPC in room. And what this is going to do is this is going to try to run our RPC function in the current online room only. So we don't want this RPC playing in other people's games. We only want it to be in our game. And then we're going to type in the name of our RPC function here. So that's going to be RPC underscore trigger FX, just like that. And then what we need to do after that is, you can see it tells me here in the IntelliSense, we need to pass in photon realtime.player target. So we need to tell it what target we want. So for our purposes here, we're going to say RPC target dot all, and that will just target everybody. So this is going to target all the copies. Like if we're playing an effect on player 1, then this function is going to trigger, and it's going to target all the copies of player 1 that exist in this current online room that we're in, just to make sure it plays on everybody. And then what we need to do is we need to pass in any required parameters, but we don't actually have any yet, but we will. So for now, we can just end the function, because you can see our RPC function doesn't actually take in any parameters yet, but we are definitely going to need parameters here. And the problem is that we can't pass in stuff like what I have here, item effects controller.instance.item fire effects at killer bomb. We can't pass that in because that's a complex data type that I created called an FX trigger. And an RPC function and what you can send over the network with Photon is only simple data. So like ints, which are whole numbers, floats, which are decimal numbers, strings you can also send, but which is like, you know, a word, and things of that nature. You cannot send any kind of complex data types. You can also send enums, though. That's the one thing you can send is an enum. So anyway, so we need to find another way to trigger this specific effect, and we're going to do that by using its hash code. And then we need to also send, you can send vector3, which is positional data. So we should be able to send the positional data here, but we cannot send a controller.transform either. So we're going to have to find another way to tell our RPC function that we want it to attach it to a specific player. And I'll show you guys how we're going to do that too. So you can see that once you start doing things over Photon, it gets a lot more complicated because, you know, like you can only send certain things over Photon, so you write all your functions out to do all this fancy stuff, and then you have to send it over the network, and the network can't take any of the fancy parameters that you set your functions up to do. So you have to break everything down into its simplest form and find ways around it. You know, like instead of passing in the player directly, because the player is a complex data type, I'll be passing in an ID for the player and then finding that player on the other person's computer, basically, is how we're going to do it. So it's kind of interesting when you start doing this Photon stuff. And I'm new at the Photon stuff too, because you know, Ben's been doing a lot of the net code, but over the last couple of days I've learned quite a lot about how to add new functions and call them over the network and stuff. Actually, Skeet, I have no idea about Raspberry Pis. Like, I could set up RetroArch for you on a Raspberry Pi. That's the limit of my knowledge. My programming is all geared towards game development, like my programming knowledge. And, you know, I know sub-web design stuff, and I know a few other things here and there, but doing a Raspberry Pi build is something totally different. It's all like Linux front end and stuff, and I don't know anything about that kind of stuff. Anyway, oh yeah, you knew somebody who was a Raspberry Pi guy, Alex? He published books on it. Whoa. Yeah, my allergies are bad today. I'm gonna blow my nose, actually, just a sec. My allergies are bad every day. Oh, really? Sloan was into Raspberry Pi stuff? Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm good now. But yeah, I'm interested in Raspberry Pi stuff. I've just never gotten into it, that's all. Oh shit, there's a link to Sloan's book. That's so cool. But yeah, I want to get into it because I'd like to build an arcade cabinet, like just a desktop one, especially so the kids could play on it. Like, I would love to build an arcade cabinet that could play like a bunch of different stuff with a Pi in it and like a real CRT screen and real arcade controls. And I could, like, you know, put some cool art on the sides. Maybe I'll get like one of my friends to make some art for the sides of the cabinet or something. And it could just like sit on a table and you could just sit and play with two players. Excuse me, with two players. I think that would be so cool. But anyway, so let's see, what else do we need to do here? So if we're in a local game, then we can just trigger the effect the way we've already been triggering it, and that should work okay. So we're going to grab this function here, and we're just going to paste that directly into our local code here. And that should work fine, because the effect is already triggering locally. So we shouldn't need to do anything else there. Got a cat hair in my mouth, jeez. Your dream project is to build an arcade cabinet too, Angie? We'll have to do it. We'll have to learn how to do it together. Because it's something I really want to do. Like, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And I would set it up with Pi so that you could play like anything from like arcade games to Sega Genesis to N64. Like, you could just play anything on it. It would be so cool. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. I don't really have a garage to work on it in, but I do have the basement I could work on it in, I guess. So this should still work fine for calling it locally for the player. But like I said, we're going to need to break all this data down into things that are sendable over Photon. For our RPC function here. So let's start with the item effects controller.instance.itemFireEffects at killer bomb. So if we go back to what I was talking about at the beginning, you can see that this line of code right here that says that I just read off, that is referencing this item fire effects dictionary, which I told you has a key and a value. And what we're looking for is the value, because we're looking for this FX trigger to tell it to trigger the correct effect. And we're finding that by entering this enum. So we're saying, okay, find the effect that's in that dictionary and the value that's associated with the key killer.bomb. So we're telling it that it's a bomb. So we need to find a way to take this and turn this into something that's sendable over Photon. So I designed the effects system to use hash codes, and what hash codes are they're a big long string of numbers. I'll show you one right now. So if we run, we have our erase controller here, we have our effects pool like I told you about, and we have these trigger templates in here. These are all the effects that we have in the game. These are the FX trigger objects that I was just showing off. So if you look at these guys here, you can see that they have a spot here called FX ID, and you can see that right now that's 0. But that's where our hash code is going to go. So if I run this scene, watch what happens over here. See all these new objects that have been created? What it did was it took all of our effects out of here, and it created an FX bank for every single one of these objects in here. And then it disables these ones. So you can see that the first object on the list we have is called Item Effects Bomb Hit. And it took that and it made this object here called Item Effects, or FX Bank Bomb Hit. And you can see that it has copies of the bomb hit effect in here. So this is the object pool for the effects so that we don't have to instantiate them. And I explained that when we were working on it, but basically it's much better and uses much less memory and much less performance hit on your game if you actually have your effects existing somewhere, move them to where you need them, play them, and then move them back and disable them. It's much better for your game than if you were to just create a new one and destroy it each time, because basically in C# uses a thing called garbage collection. It runs periodically and has to clean up all the like leftover data So if you're destroying objects all the time, then that's more stuff that it has to garbage collect, and that can really hit your performance hard in any game. And especially if we ever bring this game to Switch or something, it's going to be a requirement. So all of our items that you can throw in the game are object pooled. So there's a list of them somewhere that have like 10 bombs in there. And when somebody throws a bomb, it takes it out of the list, moves it to where the player is. The player throws it, it goes and it explodes. So it's basically all fake, is the best way to explain it. Like, nothing ever blows up, nothing ever appears out of thin air. Everything already exists in the game. It just gets moved to where it needs to go, does what it needs to do, and then gets moved back. So anyway, you can see that now this bank that has all the effects in it has an FX ID, and you can see that it actually has a hash code now because it generates when the game starts. So you can see that its hash code is just a long string of numbers. It's 684296921. And this code will be the same on everyone's computer, and it will be the same every time you load the game because the hash code is based on the name of the effect here. You can see the each single effect has the effect ID in it here too. 684, same one. And every single one of these effects in the list is going to have a unique hash code. You can see that this one is like -1384. Like it can be anything. It's based on the name of the effect, so it can be really crazy sometimes. But it's just going to be this big long list of digits here, and they're all going to be unique. They'll always be the same. They'll always be the same on everybody's separate computers, etc., etc. It's always going to generate that same hash code for that effect. So, like I said, we can send a hash code because that's basic data. It's just a string of numbers. We can easily send that. So that's what we're going to do. Instead of sending the effects trigger, we're going to send the hash code. And then we're going to look up the effect based on the hash code. So, go back into our player health system here, and we have our RPC here, RPC trigger effects. And what we're going to need to pass in here is a hash code. And we're going to pass that in. We're going to pass that in as an int, and we're going to call it FXID. And that's going to be the first thing that we pass into our RPC function here. And then instead of this fxpool.instance.triggerEffects, we're going to get rid of this. We're going to type in FXID, and instead of trigger effects, I've already written the function. We're going to trigger an effect from hash. And we'll go look at this function quickly. I wrote this function the other day. So you can see here that we have that function, and what it does is it takes in the hash code, a position, a rotation, a bool to see if it's local, and a new transform. And then it says for each effect in the bank, look for an effect that has that same hash code and trigger it. So that's fine. It's doing exactly what we need it to do. Okay, so we passed in our first thing here. We got it seeded in our function. We're good. Now, what else do we need to pass in here? We need to pass in a location, which is controller.transform.position. That's a vector 3, so that can be passed in no problem. And the next thing we're passing in is a rotation, and that's a quaternion. It's a little struct that represents a rotation, so that can also be passed in no problem. Oh, your dad's obsessed, builds arcade cabinets and rebuilds them too. Yeah, I've never actually seen their arcade cabinets. It's so cool though that he does that. And then we're passing in the new parent that we want for the object. But here's the thing. We cannot pass in a transform. A transform is a complex data type. So that's not going to do any good. So into this RPC, we're going to need to pass in a few things here. Well, actually, I guess we don't need positional data because we've already got it. Maybe we should pass it in just in case we want to change it. Yeah, so we're going to pass the positional data in. So we're going to pass in a vector 3 position and a quaternion rotation. Oh, actually, no, we're going to pass in a vector 3 rotation, sorry. and we'll use Euler angles to make sure that we get the right one here. And then we need data to tell us what player it is. So we have some stuff set up in order to be able to do this. So we're going to pass in two strings. The first string is going to be called Steam ID string, and that's the player's Steam ID. That's a good way of locating them because players' Steam IDs are the same always, but everybody's is different. But it's a 64-bit integer, I believe, so we cannot pass that into an RPC. We have to pass it in as a string. And the second string we're going to pass in is called the GUI ID string. And basically we're passing these in just to get just to tell us what player we want to play this effect on instead of using controller.transform, because that's not going to work. So now we need to tell it which player we're doing this on. So we're going to say if, well, actually, first we're going to create a ulong. Ulong is an unsigned integer, which means it can be of any length or data type, or not data type, but it can be of any length. It can store more data than a normal integer. And then we're going to say if ulong dot try parse, and basically try parse just means it's going to try to do what I'm asking it, and if it can't, then it will just skip the code below this. So we're going to try parse the Steam ID string. Oops, that we passed in. Yeah, there we go. It's the Steam ID string, and we're going to say out Steam ID. So what we're doing here is we're trying to change this Steam ID string into a ulong. So we pass in out Steam ID so that it will try to turn this into a ulong, and if it can, it will set Steam ID to be equal to that. That's what the out keyword here means. And if that's successful, our trigger effect is going to go in here. So if that's successful, then we need to find out what player it is. So we're going to say player controller. We're going to make a temporary reference to a player controller. We're going to call it P, and we're going to say it's equal to index keys dot instance dot get indexes, and we're going to get the index at Steam ID and GUI ID string dot player dot controller. So that's a little bit of a big confusing line, but basically here's what we're doing. We're passing in the Steam ID string and the GUID string. We're turning the Steam ID string into a ulong, and then we're checking the index keys class, which is a singleton, and we're asking it to get us the player that exists at the index of the Steam ID. So this will just get us the right player, basically. Checking their Steam ID, passing us back the correct player. And then we're triggering fxpool.instance.trigger effects from hash, fxid, and now we can set our position, and we can set our rotation that we passed in here. So, but we want to convert that to a quaternion. So what we're going to do is we're going to say quaternion dot look at, or look rotation, and we're going to use negative rotation here. And then we're going to say that we want it to be parented to p.transform. And that's the player controller that we just got right here. That looks good, I think. Yeah, okay. I think it should be good. I'm pretty sure. All right. So let's see. Are we done? Right, so we got to pass in the correct data here now. So we're going to pass in, we need to get we need to also get our hash code, I forgot. So we're going to use we're going to pass this in to this function instead. So we're going to pass in an fx trigger. And then we're going to get the hash code for that fx trigger. So we're going to say int hash is equal to fx trig. Oh, that's not right. Fx trig dot get hash. That'll get us the hash code. And then in here, instead of passing in the bomb directly, because this function is going to be called from all the items, we're just going to pass in fx trig, just so that we can always make sure that we're passing in, like, we're going to call this from the functions, we're going to pass in the effect we want. It's going to then convert that into a hash code so that it can call it for the RPC function here. So that's going to be hash, and then what else do we need to pass in? We need to pass in that position and the rotation that we talked about. So we're also going to need to pass those in here. So we're going to say vector3 position and vector3 rotation. And so we're going to pass those in here. So that's going to be position and rotation. And we're also going to pass them in here instead of this controller.transform. Okay. And the last thing that we need, to pass in is a player controller. Well, actually, I guess we don't need to pass in the player controller because it's just going to be this player controller. So instead of doing that, whoops, I wrote position twice for some reason. What? Why doesn't it like that? Oh, because it's supposed to be a quaternion, right? So I need to use this quaternion look rotation like I did last time. Okay, there we go. And instead of passing in this controller, well, actually, maybe we could just pass in the controller.transform. Yeah, it's safe for us to pass in the controller.transform. But down here, that's not what we're going to pass in. We need to pass in our Steam ID string and our GUI ID string. And we are going to get those from the player parent. So we're going to say controller.parent .steam ID .toString, because we want it to pass it in as a string. And then we're going to do the same thing for the GUID. So controller.parent .player GUID. And we could shorten that a bit by saying this. We can say player parent. We can make a reference to player parent. Temp is equal to controller.parent. And then you see what I just made it equal to this here, so that we could just get rid of this and just make this temp.steamid, just so that it's a little more readable. I always prefer to do that kind of thing. Maybe instead of temp, maybe we'll call it player. Well, no, I guess that kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. We'll do like a short form, like player. Player. And then we want to rename temp to player. There we go. We can do it with the autocomplete there. Okay, so let's comment this out just so we can go through it and make sure we're doing everything correctly here. So the first thing we're doing here is we're getting the hash code of the passed in FX trigger. That's the first thing we're doing. Now, this if statement is checking if we are in a local or online game. And if we're in a local game, it's triggering the effect normally from the FX pool. And if we're in an online game, we are then triggering the effects through an RPC function. And that's our RPC function there. And then we can comment this guy too. So, and you guys know I love to do XML comments. So maybe we should do that. We'll XML comment these guys. So basically this function is going to trigger an effect over either local or photon. And FX trig is going to be our FX trigger we want to play. And position is going to be the, position we want it to play at, obviously. And same for the rotation. And then we'll do an XML comment for our RPC function. Oh, actually, looks like it doesn't want us to do an XML comment for an RPC function. Oh, there we go. We got it. Just had to put it above the pun RPC. So this guy is called over photon to trigger an effect. FX ID, FX hash code, position, self-explanatory, and Steam ID and GUID. Cool. I love those XML comments. And then when you mouse over this, you can actually see, and if you're like writing out the function, you're calling it, it'll tell you. Although you're never going to call an RPC function normally, you have to call it by doing getPhotonView.try RPC in room. You can't call it normally. You have to call it like this and then have your parameters over here. So, and it kind of sucks because C# is like, hey, you never use this function, but really you have, but it doesn't detect it as a function call. So now we could use that function up here, but it's just quicker to just directly trigger the effect. But if we wanted to, we could use this RPC trigger effects function up here too. But yeah, we're not going to do that for now. So I'm pretty sure that this is good. We got everything. We got it to do everything that we need it to do. It's going to attach it's going to find an effect. It's going to attach that effect to the player, relocate the effect to the correct position in the rotation it's supposed to be in, and then the effect will be played, and then the effect will be passed back. The effect will handle itself from that point, and it'll pass itself back. It'll shut itself off when it's done, pass itself back to the effects pool at that point, to the correct bank that it belongs in. So now all we have left to do is make sure that we're calling this function correctly in our other functions here. So we're going to open back up our bomb script, which is over here now. So we'll just drag it over. And yeah, here we go. Player.healthsystem.triggerEffects. Now we need to pass in all the relevant data. So the first thing we need to pass in and see, now you can see the IntelliSense working here. So remember I typed in that the position is supposed to be the position we want to play it at? You can see that it actually tells me that here. And it tells me the overall what this function does. Trigger an effect over either local or photon. We wrote that. So it's pretty cool, because then when people go to use your functions later, they can read what it does without having to go and look at the function. It's super, super handy for when you're working with other people and stuff like that. That's why I love to use XML comments. So anyway, we need to pass in an FX trigger. So we're going to do that in the same way that we were doing it before. So we're going to say FX... actually, we're going to say... Wait, what are we going to say? I forget. What did we have before? Let's just go back just for a second so that I can see what it was. Okay, so it's item effects controller.instance.item fire effect at the correct key. Okay, so back over in our BOM here, we're going to say item effects controller.instance dot, where is it now? There we go. Item fire effects at killer dot bomb. Okay, so we've got our FX trigger passed in, and our function that we wrote will do the rest. It'll take that, get the hash code from it, pass it over photon, etc. And next thing we need is a position, and we need a rotation. So because these are item firing effects, we actually might not really need to pass in position and rotation. We can just figure all that out based on the player's position. So I think we'll rework our function just a tiny bit here. First, let's go through and do all these effects calls in all of the places that we are going to need them here. So we had this up, so we got the bomb one done. Next one is enlarger. So instead of this fx pool.trigger effects, blah blah blah, we're going to do player.healthsystem.trigger effects, and we're going to copy over this enlarger thing here, and we're going to pass that in just like that. And then I believe we can get rid of this. Okay, so we could pass in our position and rotation just like we had passed in here. And we can even pass in our player transform from here, so maybe we should do that. We'll see. We might not need that stuff. We might need it. We'll decide after here. So let's pass in our transform player into our function, and instead of saying controller.transform here, we're just going to pass in player, and yeah, I believe that's the only spot. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so we've passed in all that data. Oh, but we need to pass this in as Euler angle, so we're going to say quaternion dot Euler player dot transform dot rotation. That's a little silly though. We should just pass in a quaternion instead. Well, actually, no, we can't, because our RPC needs a vector 3. I forgot. So we need to pass in a vector 3. So why doesn't it like this? Returns a rotation. Can't I just pass in like a full transform rotation? Oh, wait, I'm doing it wrong. Sorry. We need to pass in vector 3 dot... How do we convert to a vector 3 from a rotation? I don't remember. There must be a way to do that. I feel like I know how to do it, and I'm just blanking on it right now. Just look it up quick. Yeah, Euler angles. That's what I thought, but I tried that. Ah, I need to cast it. Okay. So we're going to say vector... we're going to say... Or actually, no, we're going to say this quaternion. Player.transform.rotation.2 Euler angles. Or 2 Euler. Wait, they're both deprecated? Returns or sets the Euler angle representation of the rotation. Oh yeah, these old ones I used to use set Euler angles and 2 Euler, they're all deprecated now, so you're not supposed to use them. So I guess I just put Euler angles? Oh, cool. That's much handier than the way they used to do it. Huh. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, let's go on to the next one now. Let's just copy this. And the next one is going to be for bouncing projectiles. So we're going to do that too. We're going to put this in here. And we're going to make sure that we're triggering projectiles, not the enlarger for this. We're triggering the projectile effect at player transform.position, player transform.rotation, and player transform. So we got all the data in there correctly, the way we want it, and move on to the next. And same thing here. Whoops, I guess I didn't copy it properly. And we got to make sure that this one is killers.homers. Player transform position, rotation, and player transform. Okay, so we just used the same data for all of this stuff, so that's good. Means we don't need to do anything crazy to figure out positions and stuff. And then this guy too. And it should be fine, right? Because ideally these are all item firing effects. We're just going to want to play them like on the player at the player's rotation, so it doesn't need to be anything crazy. But this will ensure that what we're doing right now, like that part of it is already working, but what we're doing right now will ensure that these effects play over the network when we're playing a multiplayer game. All right, I think we're good to go on that. I'm gonna have to test that later in multiplayer with Ben, but I'm pretty sure that we got it working the way that we need to. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this section of what we're working on. Next, we're gonna head over and start working on the customization system like I was talking about. But if you guys just give me 1 second, I'm going to go grab a drink and I will be right back. So don't go anywhere. More mind-numbing bug fixing to come in several minutes. All right, guys, I'm back. And yeah, like I said, now we're just gonna move on to trying to fix up the customization system here over the network, which is super important. So now we got our effects handled. Let's just close out Visual Studio here for a minute, and let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. So we go into our base customization scene here. Has some unpushed changes by Vince. He's probably adding some new customization items, which is awesome. So, we got a couple components here up to how the customization system works. So, it's just basically just the way that we're storing data here. So let me move the inspector so that you guys can see everything here a little bit better. That's a bad spot for it. Let's just put it right here beside what we're looking at. Here we go. So, the customization system has this guy called the customizer. So we're going to open up this script in Visual Studio. And this is the script that handles customizing all the models and saving out the strings and just all that fun stuff. No, I don't want to give feedback on Visual Studio. Do they have to add that to everything? My God. So, the customization system is pretty complex, and it involves many scripts. So there's a lot to go through, and that's why when we have a bug in it, it's difficult. Anyway, so that's why we're going to try to do some fixes without having to pour through all the code, because there are some shortcomings of the system that we can definitely fix up here that should alleviate some of the problems. Now, so that's the customizer. That's a singleton. So basically, anytime that we need to customize a character, we just call on the customizer and use the intake function. And the next piece of the puzzle here is called the customization item inventory. Now, what this is an inventory of all the customization items that are available in the game. And it also holds strings for the local player's current equipment and their current suit data. So that's like the color of the suit and all that stuff. Oh, there's a bug I forgot to fix. Right, we need to put in the data here. So player dot transform dot position, player dot transform dot rotation dot Euler, and player dot transform. Okay, sorry, we'll get rid of that because that's going to prevent things from working correctly if we have bugs and stuff. There we go, we fixed that up. So the customization inventory, like I said, it holds the data for the local player. So it holds what they have in their inventory, how many coins they have, what loadout they're using, and it holds strings for their current equipment and their current suit string. And it has a string for their inventory as well. And then we have a shop inventory, which isn't important for what we're doing right now because that's like our little in-game shop, and that has its own inventory, which is going to be randomized each day. And then we have this thing called customization multiplayer data. Now, what this is what we're going to be looking at a little bit today, I think. So the customization multiplayer data is essentially copies of the item inventory that I was just showing off, but it's not exactly a copy, but it's for each separate player. So it holds a dictionary of player equipment data called player customization data, and it has the ability to break down the strings into items and stuff like that. Customization master. Whoops. Yeah, and that's basically all it is, I guess. There's just the inventory that tracks the local player stuff. Then there's the multiplayer data, which tracks all the players. And so basically what we have set up is that Photon is supposed to feed strings into this customization multiplayer data. But there's a possibility that it's feeding in the incorrect strings here, or feeding them in the wrong way. So I'm going to start by just looking around, poking around at that. So we have these two strings here, set data and set suit data. And what those do is these functions take in a player ID, and they take in an equipment string, and then this one takes in a suit string. And they're supposed to set that data accordingly to the correct player based on the player ID. So we're going to just take a quick peek at this function and make sure that we got it doing the right thing. So let's see, we take in the big player equip string, and then we're splitting the string down into separate characters. That's fine, that's working. And then oh, this is something Ben added, I think. Add unique, okay. We're adding it to the grouping of test strings here. That's just for debugging purposes, basically. And then for each character string, set the appropriate dictionary reference in the player equip data dictionary. So we're saying for as many character strings as there are, if the player equip data contains the player ID key, so that's the passed in player ID, then the player equip data at player ID dot set equipment string. Then we're setting the equipment string based on the string that was brought in here. And then we're saying, or if it doesn't already contain the key, then we're going to add it. Same thing with the suit data. It's basically just a copied function that does the suit data instead. So it splits the string, adds it to the test strings. For each suit data string, set the appropriate player's suit data string. Yeah, I mean, that's all doing what I think it should be doing. The only thing that I'm wondering about here is that we're using... Okay, so we're saying for each string, if... And then we're finding the characters based on I. So that should be fine because, you know, we're just setting the appropriate characters customization string here. I don't think that that's going to be an issue. And we're making sure that it's the correct player ID. So that also shouldn't be an issue, because then what it does later is it grabs the string at the correct player ID. So I'm pretty sure that these are working okay. So let's take a look at set data and let's find all the references to it and see exactly where it's being set and make sure that it's being set correctly. Okay, so we got one reference to it here in the set strings. Customization multiplayer data at 0 is equal to player string. So that's fine. That's for the first player. And that's when the game first loads. It's setting location 0 as the local player string, which is as it should be, I believe. Now let's look at the next reference. Okay, so the next reference is in the Photon connection controller. Input customization items into characters. So what's happening here? Let's see. Character select char select is equal to menus.instance.get menu character select. And we're saying for each game object in character select.player renderers, get the character renderer component and reinitialize it. And then we're saying for as many connected player datas as there are, index keys.instance.add or overwrite indexer connected player datas at i.steamplayerinfo.steamid. So that's a Steam ID and the GUID like we were doing before for the FX. Index keys, find all player references and indexes. Hey, welcome back, Skeet. For each of the connected player data, we're going to try. So we have a try catch here. So it'll try to do this. If it can't, it will do this exception. It'll log an exception. So let's see what it's doing. It's saying game slot is equal to index keys.instance.get indexes at connected player data at i.steamplayerinfo.player game slot. So it's getting the slot of the player. And then it's saying customization multiplayer data.instance.set data. So this is where it's setting it. And it's setting it for the game slot. And this should be working, I think. Connected player data is at I. Yeah, I think so. Got player customizations. So it's saying it's getting the game slot of the connected player data at I's Steam player info, and then it's setting the customization data for that game slot to be the customization data for that connected player data. So that seems right to me, unless the game slot is coming up wrong. I don't see how it could be, though. It should be the same thing. The problem that it might be is that it's setting it at game slot, but there's a chance that that's not actually the correct data. So, like, it's setting the data from game slot, but maybe that's not the correct data to be sending here. Let's see. So set data takes in the player ID. So this is where we're going to run into trouble, I think, because the player ID and the game slot aren't really interchangeable, and I think that's what's causing problems here. Because there is a chance that the player ID... It shouldn't be, but there's a chance that it could be wrong. Because if we're giving it the game slot, there's a chance that it could be coming down here and looking for that game slot and setting the data appropriately. But if the data already exists, then maybe it could be referencing the incorrect character here. That's a possibility. Okay, so at first glance, it looks like it's probably okay, and this is probably not the issue. But if we still have trouble after the fix that I want to do here, this is going to be where I'm going to look to see why it's still happening, because there's a possibility that the game slot is not setting the correct data. Like, it's not... Like the photon connection controller is not receiving the right data, or... So is this where it's receiving it? Update customizations when available. Yeah, set data. Okay, well, we'll look at our customizer script here instead, and we'll do that fix that I was talking about. So basically the issue is that when we use this intake function here, let's just see what exactly happens, because I'm pretty sure that the customization string should not ever be getting edited in here, so I need to make sure that that's not happening. Because when it intakes data, it should not be editing the players. It looks like it's not, though. It's editing something, though, here. And then looping back, I think. So let's see. List of customization items. Then it's adding. Let's get rid of this commented out code, because we actually don't need that anymore. We don't need any of that stuff anymore. Okay, so it's creating a new list of items. It's filling that list with the items from the string that it's getting here. So it's saying string is equal to customization multiplayer data.instance.player equip data at player ID dot loadout data at char ID dot loadout string at loadout ID. So that's fine. It's searching for the data in customization multiplayer data. So maybe it's getting the wrong player IDs here. Maybe this is the issue. It's not getting the correct player IDs. I have to make sure that this intake function is always using game slot. So let's take a look at that. So it's happening in the character renderer. This could be a problem. It's using a player ID that's set. Huh. Okay. So, those player IDs are always the same. So if you're in player slot 0, you should be the first group of character renderers, but there's a possibility that that's not true. So this could also be causing an issue here. And then what about this one here? Yeah, see, this one is using the player game slot, so this should be fine. So here it's looking at the index keys. It's saying index keys.instance.get indexes at player parent.steam ID, player parent.player GUID. Yeah, that should be fine because that's using the same game slot that's setting the customizations like we were looking at before. So that doesn't seem to be the issue because that seems right to me. But this could very well be the issue here. We should be getting the game slot and setting it according to their game slot, not setting it according to like a hard-coded player ID on the boxes. And ideally that it should be right, but I think there's cases when it wouldn't be. I'm pretty sure. Especially if you like get into a party and you're in and it thinks you're in a player slot that you're not supposed to be in and stuff like that, which has happened before. So basically what we're going to have to do here to fix this is we're going to have to get the player ID of whoever is using this character renderer, which I think is something that we can do. Because there have been instances where like people have joined a party and they've been put in the incorrect slot or stuff like that, so that would definitely screw their customizations up. Roma is too much. Who's Roma? Is that one of your cats? Okay, so how do we get a reference to the player in this script? So I think we can get the player controller or the player parent from the character model, I think. We should be able to. Well, actually, not necessarily. We need to be able to get... Okay, let's see. Public, default character, current character, list of models, default models, renderer. Yeah, this is the problem right here that I want to get rid of. It's a men's right advocate. Whoa, I've never even heard of that. Background character indicator. So, we need to find some way to tie this to the actual player so we can get the correct ID. Make sure that we're getting the correct ID. So let's see what references character renderer. Menus does, character select script does. Because there must be some reference to... must be some reference to it. Customizer.instance.intake, char ID, character model, player ID. And let's see how we did it over in the other one here. Oh, that's right. We got indexkeys.instance.getIndexes at playerparent.steamid, playerparent.playerGUID. So we need to be able to do that, and in order to do that, we need the player parent of whatever player is attached to that character renderer. Okay. I have an idea. Menus. Okay, character select. I think this is where we're going to find what we're looking for. Event system tracker. This is what we're looking for. Yeah, see, here's the indexes. Here's the player game slot. Player ID is equal to indexkeys.instance.getIndexes e.assigned player. Steam lobby controller, Steam party player info, event system tracker.assigned player. So this is getting the index key right here to the player that's assigned. So what is this? Event system tracker.assigned player. E.gameObject is active in hierarchy. It's changing the character model. Change players on all other Photon clients. So if the Photon connection controller is online, then we're doing change character renderer RPC function here. And we're using that player ID that we got, and that works correctly. So we need to get this player ID. That's in the character select script. So do we have... Does the character select have a reference to the renderers? It must, right? Player renderers. This is where it's getting it. Character model current is equal to player renderers at player ID dot get component character renderer dot current character model. So right, we could do it that way. Okay. Change model does the same thing. And RPC change character renderer does it too. So we just have to make sure that these character renderers, so we're going to add a new, well actually we can just use player ID because it already exists. We're just going to always make sure that this is right. So we need to set it. In this character select when it changes the model and stuff like that. So this player ID is here. What function is this in? On update. So we can just do it right here, I think. We can say player renderers at player ID dot get component character renderer dot player ID is equal to player ID. And that should always set it to the correct ID. Should set it to the correct ID basically as soon as it starts up. Yeah, this should work, I think. This will fix it if that's an issue. So I'll have to test this later with Ben too, but if this part where it uses this player ID, which was hard-coded originally, now that player ID will change depending on what player is using the character renderer. And when it does this customizer.instance.intake, it should always pass in the correct player ID now. So that should be fixed, I think. Whether that will fix the whole thing, I'm not sure, but that's at least part of it fixed up now. Now, see the intake function. Now, as long as the intake function is getting the right player ID, and it should be. because we're feeding in the player IDs based on the game slot index. And that's exactly what we want to do. Customization string, instance player equipment data player ID .loadout, blah, blah, blah. So that should be getting the right string there. It's getting it from the multiplayer data based on that player ID, and that's working. And then what's it doing down here? Attach each item. If the game is in the menu and the menu type is not character select, then, oh, okay, so that's already fixed actually. So as long as the menu is not in the character select menu, then you should be able to customize your guys here. And what's that doing? It's setting the player equip data at player ID to the local player data if you're the first player, and it's doing that by saying get indexes of the local player info.player game slot. So it's all using player game slot now. And if it's not the local player, then we're adding equipment to the list here. Wait a minute, though. Oh, right. So it should only ever do this one time. So if it's not the... It should never actually do this. Else player equipment data .add. Oh, wait a minute. We don't want that. So if it's in the menu, but it is in character select, then it's still going to do this, which we don't want it to do. For each customization item in items, if we're not in the character select, okay. So these lists, do they ever get used to affect the strings? Because if they do, that could definitely be causing a problem here. However, I don't think that they do. Yeah, let's change that. We don't want it to do that. We don't want it to change this list. This list should already be set up by the time we get to character select, so there's no reason to change it once we're in character select. That's just going to cause problems. So basically what we want to do is we only want to change this list if we're in the customization menu. If we're not in the customization menu, we don't want this list to be able to change because at that point it's set up already and we don't want it to change. So we can basically just comment this out for now. You were listening to me in your sleep? Well, this stuff is pretty boring to watch, I imagine, but it's stuff that's got to get done. Sometimes That's what game development's like, you know. There's always fun stuff you can do, but there's also stuff you got to get done. Bug fixing being chiefly among those things. So yeah, all we want it to do if we run this intake function, oh, the squawk. All we want this intake function to do is if we run it when it's not in the customization menu, all we want it to do is attach items to the character. No, not tonight. Tonight is a day off for me. That's why I do my programming stream today. But I'll be playing again tomorrow on my main account. Streaming Luna night. All right, guys. Well, we got a few things fixed here, and that's about all I've got time for today. And if I try to tackle something else on stream, it's going to take too long, I think, compared to what I'm doing, or compared to how much time I have left. So, because I only got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to call the stream there today for today. But yeah, I'll be back next week with some more stuff. Hopefully we can be working on the mission stuff next week, so because I should have this bug fixing stuff done, and that'll be a lot more interesting because we're building that mission system from the ground up still, so be interesting to work on that on stream for sure. So yeah, and I will, tonight is my day off on my twitch.tv/markgamedev channel, but you can catch me playing games there at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and also I usually play on Tuesday, Wednesday. So yeah, if you're interested, go over there, give me a follow. You'll be notified when I go live. But yeah, for now, just look forward to the team dev stream tomorrow, where we're going to be testing, you know, all of our bug fixes from the week and stuff. So that should be fun. All of us are going to be there. Well, five of the 6 of us are there every week. So Luna, yeah, she's not actually streaming, but all right. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for sticking with me. I know it's kind of dry today because it's just bug fixing, but hopefully it was still somewhat interesting. And like I said, next week we should be getting back to some gameplay stuff and working on the new mission system and all that stuff. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, come and join us for the team stream tomorrow, and get to say hi to all of us. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys soon. Actually, let me just see if there's anybody to raid here quickly. I really would just want to raid somebody if they're like doing game dev or something as well. So I'm just going to check the science and tech category, see if I can find anybody. Ugh, I hate how they don't have a game development category anymore, because like the science and tech category is now just a bunch of crap and like some game development. Oh, well, we can go raid Lana Lux again. Yeah, let's do that. She's doing some game dev again. not exactly sure what she's working on, but we rated her again the other day. So yeah, anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, guys.
I don't know what to do with that information. Above what? Oh, there it is. From you mean from Alkazer? Pixel Nods, thank you very much for the raid. How was your stream? Thank you, Nin. Hair in my eye. Probably what's causing it to start twitching. App data folder roaming. Yes, thank you.